Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. We've got an interesting guest this evening, Michael Horn. So I'll see if I can give him a call right now and see if we can get in touch with him. And we'll take it from there. Dial studio now.
Hello.
Hey, Michael, how are you this evening?
Good. How is my vocal quality? Am I close enough to the mic or not?
You sound great.
Oh, okay. I'll take it.
I've been working a lot the past couple days, and I just got in the door here just in time to do the show. So we got massive storms rolling in here, so if I suddenly disappear, it'll probably be because of that. What's new with you?
Oh, there's a bunch of stuff. Are we rolling already, or
we are rolling? We shall.
Okay, because there's some stuff I definitely want to address.
Okay, fire away.
We're on?
We are on.
Okay. Well, Mark, with everything that's going on in the world and unfolding day by day, it brings me back to a couple of lines that I usually use when I introduce the Meier case in a live presentation, sometimes in an interview, and it's this. And I think we'd agree to this. Probably everybody in your audience would agree to this, I'm going to guess, that the single most important discovery in human history would be the confirmed existence of intelligent extraterrestrial life, exceeded only by established contact with that life, with those life forms. And so I'm going to take this in a little place that might bother some people, but I really have to, for the sake of what is happening in the world, for what the Meier case is about, for the great, great expense of time and energy and love and concern on the part of Meier and the Pleiaren for us on Earth. And here's where it goes. I've listened to different interviews with different people. I've met with different people in this so-called UFO community and all of that. And the one who I happen to have caught an interview of yours with, one Stephen Bassett. So I have a question for you. I have a question for anybody in the audience as well, and that is, can anybody actually state one single piece of actual evidence that Bassett has ever presented for claims of the following? A so-called extraterrestrial presence on Earth, and I'm quoting here, millions of contactees and huge numbers of abductees, and of course for hybrid alien human babies. And I'm saying this because over the years, Stephen Bassett, among other people, have been very vocal about all of these claims about extraterrestrial this and that. I hear sounds of, is that the storm rolling in?
Yeah, you're starting to get a little fuzzy. I don't know what happened because you were real clear in the beginning.
Yeah, maybe it. Well, if it goes fuzzy again, let me know. We can try because this is very important to me to get this out because, all right. So I mentioned that I'm questioning whether anybody, you and anyone in your audience, has ever actually seen one piece of evidence, corroborated evidence for any of Bassett's claims, and those are about a so-called extraterrestrial presence, millions of contactees and abductees, and for hybrid alien human babies. I have personally spent over 6 hours on a couple of occasions, combined 6 hours of speaking to Stephen Bassett. My conversation, of course, was focused around the Meier case. My offers were to present it when he had what were called the X Conference. My offers were to make it all available to the exopolitics groups and community to research. And in all of those cases and efforts, Stephen Bassett turned it down. Are we still clear in our recording here?
Right here.
Okay. All right. Not only did he turn it down, he told me that he knew the Meier case was authentic, which you couldn't get him to talk about during the interview, by the way. That he knew the Meier case was authentic, but that it wasn't time for it yet. That it was more important for people to rush to their computers and their telephones and fax Washington about the government UFO cover-up. Now, this is the problem, and I am absolutely as serious as can be. And I will state these things, and I will be glad to debate this man. I've offered it many times. He's refused every time. So I will say the following. This man is a phony. He's a charlatan. He's a liar, and he is a coward. And it is really an insult to the truth for anybody at any point from here on, as well as long ago, to give this man a minute of presence or airtime. I've presented in both Canadian and United States universities. I really doubt that they would have this huckster come in. He can't present one piece of evidence for all this nonsense. They call this group exopolitics, as if a real and advanced extraterrestrial race wants to have anything to do with our absolutely insane and degenerate politics. To me, this is not a joke because these people have sucked up the bandwidth. They've conducted phony hearings with Congress people or former Congress people who were paid 5 figures to sit there and go, very interesting, extraterrestrials, aliens, UFOs. It's never amounted to anything except distracting from the Meier case. The Meier case is the only thing left that is truly covered up of any importance. Did Roswell happen? Yes, and many other crashes. Is there any available testable evidence? No. So the Stanton Friedmans and the people that run around yammering about Roswell, it's reached the point of utter irrelevancy long ago. I am particularly targeting this person, Stephen Bassett, as a damaging phony who has helped to harm the distribution, the spreading and dispersion of the truth. And here we are in America now, and in this world, facing the very specific things that Meier and the Plejaren and the prophets of old have foretold would come down on our poor heads if we didn't wake up to the truth. So when a Stephen Bassett says it's not time for it yet, which he told me to my face about 8 years ago and I almost fell over, then I tell you that these people are worse than the government because they have garnered media time and airtime. They have been able to promote conferences and get press out and all of that. And what they've done is to mislead people who need to know. This country, we were told as far back as 1981, would have 2 coming civil wars. And I laughed at that when I read it in the 1980s. I'm not laughing at it anymore. Mainstream commentators, left, right, and to the center, are using those terms this day. Civil wars. coming to America.
Can
Please, go ahead.
I want to support what you're saying here, but I want to read from Contact Report 544, and this is Billy speaking. He says here, when I consider that which you already confided to me during my great trip in 1975, which I think was his trip in the mothership, that according to your probability calculations, the superpower USA could come to an end after 2020 if nothing in this country changes for the better by then, and if those who are USA's allies continue to disassociate from that country. I just wanted to throw that in.
Yes, and that's from 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And remember, there's a fairly newly posted document from Svath but from 1948 that also only brings our history up to around 2020. He only talks about world events and all. 2020, 2025, they don't even mention the U.S. in there. And they, of course, all the stuff with the European Union and crazy Merkel and the sleepers coming in and spreading out, all that stuff that's in the 48 document. Meier published warnings about that in 58, and on and on. So I am particularly angry that these puny little political cowards who've banded together in their little UFOCI, their UFO community and industry, and that includes Stephen Greer and Paula Harris, all the people who, well, quite frankly, going back to the late 90s, were attacking me for calling out frauds like Alex Collier, and for coming forward and saying the Meier case is authentic and singularly so. And I got banned in the early 2000s from presenting at the International UFO Congress because I called those people out. And it's on my DVDs, and of course, because I made these things public, and they couldn't do anything except ban me because they're liars and they are hucksters who promote circuitous, dead-end, chase-your-tail nonsense. I just made a presentation actually in Los Angeles a couple of weeks back. And two things happened, which I hope got filmed. I'll know in a little while because there was someone there with a camera. One of them was Jan Hartson, who's the director of MUFON, who I happen to like. He's a very likable and sincere guy. Let me say that. However, he's the head of MUFON, which is a major disinformation agency that clears most of the better evidence, any better photos or films or anything, through the CIA and State Department first, whether Jan knows it or not. I have that. This is published on my website, and sources are there. So Jan was up. I came into the room while he was at the tail end of a presentation about UFOs and all this stuff, and I raised my hand, and he said, "Hi, Michael. Yes, you have a question?" I said, "Jan, yeah, I have a question. I have a statement. In 1979, Jan, I managed to find the Billy Meier case. Photos, information, that was the beginning." I said, MUFON was founded 10 years before that. How come you guys haven't managed to really find the Billy Meier case with all these people chasing their tails out in chasing UFOs and lights in this guy? Well, he got very uncomfortable and hemmed and hawed and all of that stuff because it's a political thing. They cannot, they will not, even though they mentioned the Meier case finally, somewhere in the back pages of their website, they won't talk about it because it empties the room. It would kill their cash cow because it's the only real thing going on that isn't secret military or, on the rare occasions that we cite, some ships from another race that's cruising around. Then I was on a panel discussion with a bunch of people, and one of the knuckleheads got up and started to say something really along these lines. I've recently found out that the Dracos and the reptilians now only have 1% control over the deep state and the dark. I processed the Dracos and reptilians through the central sun. At which point I got up and I said, could we stop the BS here with all this lunacy? This is the reason the UFO, community and all of this topic is marginalized and it isn't taken seriously by scientists because of all these loony claims where the lowest possible standards are in the UFO community, and none of this holds a candle to the evidence of the Meier case. Well, of course, a few people don't like hearing that, but what are you going to do? It's the truth. And we're at a point, historically, we don't know, honestly, Mark, from day to day, We don't know what or when the next event is that strikes closer to home. The only thing, in my opinion, right now, keeping the sleepers that are already in the U.S. from attacking here like they have been attacking in Europe and other places. Of course, attacks go on in the Middle East and in Africa, and you don't hear a lot about it. The only thing keeping it right now, I think, from happening is the fact that Trump has this attempt to ban visitors from 6 or 7 countries that were on Obama's list. And so that's been held up in the courts. And I'm not speaking, I didn't vote for Trump. But Trump is right about trying to protect the country while we have all these judges and idiots, especially on the left, who are so stupid and unknowing that they are basically holding the doors open so that everybody who has ill intent can get in while the getting is good. Now, if the point comes when a little more heat comes on, if Trump gets that through, you're going to see those attacks, if not before. I'm hoping to be wrong, but if you go into the Enoch Prophecies, when he talks about, I think your audience knows what the Enoch Prophecies are. I'm pretty sure because I know you've read from them, right? Everything.
Oh yeah. We cover that all the time. There's another thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but I wanted to read a couple more paragraphs from this Contact Report 544 because it mentions a few things I think you'll like hearing. And this is Billy here. It says, a small number of persons are trying really very hard to form a good FIGU group in the USA. So they are also really good people over there who try very hard. And if I thereby think solely of Michael Horn, who has already worked for so many years for the teaching and the mission, he and his work cannot be highly enough praised. Indeed, not all human beings need to be working in his tireless scope because a lesser commitment is already very valuable, and such a one can be achieved by many in America. However, these correspond only to a minority, but if they engage themselves, then much can be achieved through them. A small number of human beings can achieve very much and bring in many changes for the better and for the good if they make the effort. How does it go? Constant dripping wears away the stone. Consider in this sense everything unloving, evil, unpeaceful, and disharmonious, wrong, liberal as well as Gewalt, addiction to the rule and addiction to might, and every hatred, every revenge, as well as every addiction to retaliation will in some way be worn down to the ground, as well as every dictatorial and that which harms everything dictatorial and that which harms life and limb. And then Ptah says, there is nothing there with which to argue because your words correspond to reality. This, however, changes nothing in our attitude. If in relation to human beings and the behavior of the American people, something changes for the better, for the good and the right, then will we also change our opinion. But we are very pleased regarding the outgoing efforts for many years by Michael Horn, whereby he has provided extraordinary services which are of inestimable value, while we also acknowledge the efforts of those people in the USA who tried for decades to form a FIGU group and also made an effort in terms of learning the spiritual teachings. Unfortunately, they have not achieved the objectives that they claimed they wanted to achieve. So I thought I would just throw that in for you, Michael. I thought you deserved to hear that.
That's very sweet. It is. What we can take away from that, to use a current term, is that really any and everybody that wants to contribute to the truth, to changing the course of the way this country and the world is going, can do so just through a little effort.
I agree with you. And it's very interesting because I interviewed a couple of people who are working with Stephen Bassett, and they tried to make the case that we need a government disclosure. And I was explaining to them that if they do enough research, the need to have the government tell you anything will slowly go away. Do you agree with that, Michael?
Oh man, that is if this is, and I've said this for the longest time. Why? First of all, these people say the government is. I say, so why would you turn to try and get the government to do anything? And first of all, most of the government doesn't know a darn thing about the so-called UFO, this, that, and the other thing. They really don't. But now, hacks and shills like Bassett and others try to, and they get these people to waste their time, to waste their lives with this kind of stupidity where they won't listen. The core of the teaching in the Meier case is self-responsibility. Now, when you can make a difference by, contributing to a mass or a public, governmental, go ahead, but you really think sending faxes to the government, it gets you anything more than those things going straight to the shredder? Who cares? This is why it's a fraud. Exopolitics and our little wannabe politician. This is a guy who's literally a failed politician. Now he's found a home, just like Michael Sala did, in the least discerning possible strata of society, UFO world. So they form exopolitics where they can carry on their fraud and their charade, and then they get too many people just wasting their time. Now, I'm going to read a couple of sentences here because of what I said about sleepers and about terrorism and why I think, Trump is right. He wants to protect the country. Idiots who are so against him just categorically and who mischaracterized him in some ways. Listen, let me just say, he's got the worst environmental policies anybody could ever have, but you got to support someone when they're right and you got to oppose them when they're wrong. So here's what the Prophecies said. With its global conflicts, which are continuously instigated by it and which will continue far into the future, America is creating enormous hatred against itself worldwide in many countries. As a result, America will experience enormous catastrophes which will reach proportions barely imaginable to people of Earth. And the sentence that follows says, the destruction of the WTC, i.e. the World Trade Center, by terrorists will only be the beginning. These are prophecies foretelling things because of the wrong direction we are allowing our country and hence the world to go in. Now, these prophecies were given to Meier in 1967. They're actually over 10,000 years old from the prophet Enoch or Enoch. Believe them or don't believe them, accept them or not, there are ways to actually prove their authenticity. I'll go into that at another time if we need to, but this is why I have had it with these miserable phonies who parade around in the charlatan field and do such harm when the truth has been given to us by real, live extraterrestrials and their rep on Earth, Mr. Billy Meier, for some 75 years. And we still give this fool, and he should be run out of town. We should shut down anything to do with UFOs and ETs that does not lead with the Meier material as the standard against which to test those claims.
Well,
so,
let me.
Sorry
to interrupt you, Michael. Let me throw in another question here. Do you see Stephen Bassett as a misguided person or as a person who's a phony? Could you make that distinction?
Yes, I'll make that distinction. In my opinion, having personally interacted with him, having listened to interviews and all the rest of this stuff, I will say it is my personal opinion that this man is a self-serving phony who could do nothing else and lucked out by getting into a field where there's enough poor gullible people who can be misled and walk down the wrong road, and he can make a buck off of it or survive on it or whatever you want to call it. This is deliberate. I have talked to this guy face to face, hammered away at the singular authenticity of the Meier case, which he could not dispute. He said it was authentic. Even he said that. And he refused to allow it to be presented in any venue that he had control over. This man has hidden the truth from the Americans and people in other countries and with the backing of a guy in Canada, Tom Clearwater, some millionaire guy who's backed this whole fraud. Who knows what's really behind all these people or who's really behind all these people? My suspicions are that there are other parties in there who benefit from this suppression. Knowingly or otherwise, people like Bassett and Clearwater do the bidding of the intelligence services, the disinformation specialists. This is no longer any kind of a joke. This is our lives. And I can guarantee you, from what you've said about 2020, which is technically 2.5+ years away, people who are listening to our show, people who hear about this, will be rueing the day. They will be lamenting and crying out that this hoax was perpetrated on, certainly on the people of this country for all these years by the Bassetts, the Greers, the Salas, the Paula Harrises, the Open Mind Group, every one of these phonies, SETI on the other side of the aisle of supposed scientists, every one of the people that I have mentioned and more have received over a period of years the Meier material. I've been sending it out recently to others. There's a guy at something called Interverse, Neil, N-E-E-L, something or other. I've sent him information. These people will not respond because they want to hold on and milk their little precious cash cows dry and not admit that there are people who know far more than they will ever know unless they get into the same information. And they are so hell-bent to lock it up and to be important and to get theirs while their getting is good that they don't even dare to say, gee, hey, maybe we should respond. They won't even challenge this. They will not even call it out as being a fraud or anything else, because to do so is to draw attention to it, and they already know in some part of their small, selfish brains that this is real and that they are the last to be in on it.
Michael, I have a caller with a question. Are you ready? Can you take a question?
Yes, but first I'm going to turn down my intensity. How's this?
That's a good idea. 323, is this Lily?
Yes, this is her.
Well, thanks for calling in. I've got Michael Horn on the line, and you can fire away with a question if you like.
Hi, Michael. Are you come down
Hi,
now?
Lily. Hi, Lily. How are you?
Actually, good. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you.
My question is regarding, I don't know if you, I'm pretty sure you have seen it, the video that Figu Canada just posted maybe like a week ago about the destruction of the environment due to overpopulation. After I watched that video, I was really disturbed to the point that I couldn't sleep. So my question is, what can we do? How can we make a difference being so small in an 8.7 billion population world?
Right. Well, you know, the truthful answer as far from where I sit today, the only thing, those of us who have taken the time to evaluate and discern and come to a conclusion that this material is correct, overpopulation is the root of basically all of these problems. You can start with overpopulation and take almost any, call it social or world, environmental, any problem. You can go to the core will be rooted in overpopulation and the vying for resources and strife caused by that, etc. So that truth for me is we speak the truth. We let people know who want to know. We don't bang on their doors and just wave our fingers in their faces and all that. The other part of the truth, as I see it now, is some of the things that we are concerned about who have found the Meier material and who are just generally concerned about overpopulation and safety and terrorism and all the rest of it. We have passed the point of no return for some of the Henoch prophecies. Sorry to have to say it, because my personal mission in life is to help prove those prophecies wrong. And the only way you can do that is by getting enough people to wake up and change them. There are people waking up, Lily, as you know, and Mark knows, and many people in your audience know. There are people who are finding the truth. And look, there are a lot of people who are truth seekers who are not involved with the Meier case, but they've got their heads screwed on right. Perfect, wonderful. We're all pointing in the same direction. The problem is the Meier case has given us this advanced information based on the law of physics, the law of cause and effect. If you don't do this, you get that. If you do this, you get this. If you don't want this, do that. And as much as many of us have put that information out and tried to besiege people who have some more public influence to pay attention, it's largely fallen on deaf ears with some few small exceptions. So we have to hold true to just speaking and living the truth, not endangering ourselves by so doing, but just holding that moment-by-moment awareness to do all that we can for the betterment of humankind. It will pay off, if not in the near future. We are sowing the seeds for the distant future for humanity. And we know one other thing. Seeds, in order to grow, also need fertilizer. And this world is so full of fertilizer that ultimately the seeds will bear fruit.
I want to throw Lily, along with what you're saying there, I wanted to hear both of you comment on this if you could. I had a population expert named Frosty Wooldridge on my show a couple months ago. He comes on pretty regularly, actually, and he told me something I literally did not believe him, and I told him I didn't believe him and then after the show he sent me a link and he proved it to me. He told me that in Beijing, China, which there's 14 million people in that city, he said there are 50 lanes of traffic that go in one direction around that city. 50. And I just couldn't believe it. I said, that's just impossible. And he sent me the link on YouTube, and I saw it. I just could not believe it. I think they once had a traffic jam that lasted like 2 weeks, and the government had to bring food in by helicopter so people wouldn't starve to death. I mean, it was crazy. I've also had another guest on who told me that in Beijing, during the middle of the day, the air pollution is so bad, sometimes it looks like night. Could you comment on that, Michael?
Well, it's startling to hear, and I think if you could post that and send that link around, I for one, would also, share it on my blog, my website. But what it makes me think of right away, because Lily just asked this question about overpopulation, you're giving this kind of evidence, and my first response was that in the Meier material they talk about how overpopulation leads to strife and vying for resources. Now, if we take that thought and we look at the other prophetic material about how China will, also along probably ultimately with Russia because of our craziness, will go on a military march. And of course, they're so overpopulated, they've got an army, I think, of close to, available close to 1 billion soldiers. This is the insanity that overpopulation breeds and that overbreeding breeds. So in every sense of it, we see through your dramatic illustration, courtesy of Mr. Is it Wooldridge? I saw you. I heard one of your interviews with him, and he was really fascinating. He's loaded for bear from the moment you start talking to him. But this is so astounding, and it's so much. We're in such denial about it. Something of that magnitude. Gosh, won't people even wake up to that, with that kind of reality? What can one say except to go back to what I said to Lily here, which is, look, in a sense, we're past the point of return on certain elements in the prophecies. That's now a fact, but it doesn't mean we give up. It doesn't mean that we don't pursue the truth and living in the truth and living in cooperation more and more, trying to understand others. Because this is so, I just did a presentation. I hope we captured it on the film. I'll put it out as a DVD when I was in LA. And in a workshop I did, we have to, knowing that there's so much polarization going on now, knowing that people are so much incited and at each other's throats from politics, religion, class war, pumping and fomenting the fires for racial division and economic, we've got to now, knowing that and knowing how it's too easy to get sucked into it, instead, we have to find a way to have understanding for each other, which means we don't have to buddy up to everybody in the world, but if we can start to understand people and then treat people with love, which doesn't also mean gushing all over, it just means with this kind of understanding of here's another human being, human experience, universe, whole context of life in any and every other person we see in our daily life, and extend that understanding. First, that we have to develop it in ourselves, and then just to treat people with kindness. If we can't interact with people, leave them alone. If we can assist and help to do that. I recently met with somebody who's an interesting person. I'll give you her contact information because she does interviews too, Mark. And she was talking about something someone once said to her about it's important to be kind to people, not nice. There's a big difference. And being, and it's funny because if you're truly kind, you don't have to worry about being nice. Nice in the connotation, the way it was conveyed in her speaking to me, the feeling is niceness is a kind of a false, often false or condescending or, trying to avoid being real with people, when kindness can be a real and genuine way of dealing with people. And it also allows you to be kind to yourself and to not deal with people that you're not able to. And, there are these little distinctions. So more and more, this bridging the gap in understanding, finding by extending love that we find ourselves to people, cooperating and assisting whenever it's possible. And when interacting actively with people in those ways isn't possible, to hold the understanding inside ourselves and the love for people. And you can love people that you don't even like. You can recognize, you recognize their humanity, their sameness of equal value, as Billy says, to you, to me. And you can say, you know what, they may be of equal value, but this and this doesn't work for me. I hold the love for them, and I just go on my merry way. I don't have to enter. I don't like them. If you want to know, but I love them. Because I understand, I get the sameness of our predicament as human beings as well. So who knows, but when we have to be in those proverbial trenches with each other and helping shovel our way out of a common mess with people with whom we don't agree and we don't even like, but we can pull together as human beings when we need to, and those times are coming. We will see them in our lifetime, in this country and all over the world.
It's interesting. Just before you start talking about kindness, Eve chatted in the chat room. I'm seeing so much in the way of people not respecting others, only thinking of self, pushing in without a care for others. And she mentioned that we should at least have respect for others. Interesting timing.
That's it. That's exactly it.
If you don't mind, I want to read a little something from Billy's book, The Way to Live. It's really interesting. I love this particular principle. It says, striving creates the life right up to the being. Striving means delectation in a form which is always fulfilling and progressive. To be without striving means unwillingness and affliction. Affliction is inhibited striving and inhibited life. But inhibited striving and inhibited life bring inhibited evolution and stagnation, hopelessness, grief, confusion, irrationality, joylessness, cognitionless, unpeace and disharmony, lovelessness, resentment, lies, self-deceit, and reluctance for life. So this is one of these wonderful creational natural laws that Billy talks about, striving. And one of the things I was trying to tell these folks that are working with Bassett is when you start to study this material and you start learning these kind of principles, that these ideas of, again, needing a government to come in and tell you the reality of certain contacts seems so absurd.
It is. And look, it can be said, we're not here to push things on other people and all that, and I get pushy, I know that. But when you're in a field and you're discussing content and context, and people are now wanting to disempower themselves by, let's turn to the government or whatever else, and you have false, diminutive so-called leaders who want to elevate themselves in importance and rally people to do useless things. I mean, that is the shame of it. It's just really shameful. We must strive. We must be our own heroes very often and still come together with others of like mind who are willing to stand up and be strong and not turn over their power to anybody else, governments included.
You mentioned that you thought Greer was a phony. Why would you say Stephen Greer is a phony?
I'm glad you asked. Well, going back 10 or 11 years or so, maybe a year more than that, I was on a UFO panel in LA during an expo there, a whole life expo or something. They had a panel for UFO. Stephen Greer was sitting 2 or 3 people from me, and he was talking about the need for disclosure, blah, blah, blah. And I raised my hand, and I got up, and I turned to Stephen Greer, and I said, Stephen, you've got all these people that come forward talking about their sightings. They don't know what they're looking at. But how about this? Let me give you an open invitation. Any and everything in the Meier case is yours. You can run with it. Bring it to your organization. Stephen Greer not only didn't say it, he wouldn't even look in my direction to acknowledge it. Even over the past number of years, I have sent information to Stephen Greer, to people involved with his organization. For a time, Dyson Devine and Vivian Legg in Australia belonged to the Disclosure Project. They tried to bring the Meier material to them. They were ignored, scolded, or refused, or whatever. This tells me that this is not a truth seeker, and especially when you're selling so-called experiences, trainings, which are completely nonsensical and bogus. How can somebody who's never had contact with an actual extraterrestrial race that they can prove tell you it's going to train you to interact with them, but for hundreds to thousands of dollars? Why hasn't it ever occurred to all of these phonies that if ETs want to contact anybody here, they know how to do it, and you don't have to go spend a fortune to run out into the desert with your flashlight thinking that every little blip or light is an extraterrestrial who's trying to get in touch with you because you've spent so much money. You better start hallucinating that you're seeing something out there, or you're going to feel like you're an idiot, which, of course, if you've spent that money to do that, you are. So
he does charge like $800 to go on those outings, doesn't he?
That's correct.
That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money for nothing. And it's a lot of money, to be lied to from the get-go. This man claimed, and he had a video going out, whatever it was called, Ryan, I don't remember what it was. He put out some stupid video about proof of ETs, and they had a little mummified human being in there. Wasn't an extraterrestrial or anything. This guy raises money endlessly for so-called free energy. They've never brought anything for. I mean, this is hucksterism. But people like entertainment. They want to be lied to because it's safe. They've got somebody up there, giving them, I was formerly an emergency room doctor. Now I'm going to lead you to the desert where you can meet extraterrestrials. Oh, good. You think people don't really know in their heart of hearts that it's BS? As I said in the beginning of the show, the confirmed existence of extraterrestrial life would be the single most important discovery story, whatever you want to call it, event in human history, exceeded only by established contact with it. That is what Billy Meier has had for 75 plus years, and it's what none of these other dreadful poseurs and liars and hucksters and charlatans and phonies can hold a candle to. If they were honest human beings, they would at least go, you know what? Maybe it's time to let the truth in, because we are going down this hole so fast, and through our own complicity, helping people dig their way into delusion and destruction, when we could have helped to postpone or prevent some of this horrific stuff. I have contempt for these people.
You know, the good news may be, I think we may make it. No. I think we may make it past 2020, which I think is a good thing, right?
Well, sure. It's just that this country, look, the Civil War warnings twice, in 81 and 87, the country will have 2 terrible civil wars, blah, blah, blah. This country can and probably will have those civil wars, and anarchy is what Billy's describing. He's even said it's going to be the prevailing condition for the world. So we will have tremendous, things going on in the world, and right here in this country, people will survive. Some people won't, some people will. We do our best to learn to follow the spiritual teaching so we can hone our own abilities to know how best and where best to live, to be of service to ourselves and to our friends and to the rest of the world, and to survive as best we can through the rough ride that is now, it's begun. We're in it. We're proceeding slowly out of that chute in the amusement park when the roller coaster is still going slowly enough before you start going up that hill that's going to plunge you down and around and over and upside down.
Do you have any more Talmud of Emmanuel's available?
Yeah, they're coming in this week because I'm glad to say that they go out pretty quickly. It costs money to order them to sell them, so I can't stock hundreds, but I order them so that within a few days' time, they're back here.
So you have available now, well, you've had these books available. Let me just say a few: Might Have Thoughts, The Way to Live, The Psyche, and now you have Talmud of Emmanuel available, right?
Yeah, and the Goblet, too.
Oh, the Goblet, yeah. Oh, you have a hardbound version of that, don't you?
Yeah, 4.5 pounds worth.
Are those still available?
Yes, of course. Now,
you in stock.
Good. I stock it, and then sometimes what will happen is suddenly I'll get a few orders, and then they're sold out, so I order them, and then they're replenished. And they're replenished usually within 1 week's time. So that's the usual thing. What's amazing, and I commented about this to a couple of people, I can order books for replenishment from the publisher in Australia and get them often within 4 days. So
that's great.
People really have to wait. I do tell people on my website, look, allow 10 days to 14 days, just because sometimes the books can go out of, we're waiting and a shipment can get delayed, like from Canada or someplace. It happens. And also, you get a holiday or a weekend, whatever. But I try to get the book, when I get an order, if I have those books in, they go out within 24 hours. So those delays are only, basically really when there's some kind of a shortage and we're waiting to, just for the arrival of the books at the post office. Otherwise, zippity-doo-dah, they go right out.
And I've heard that the Talmud is very interesting in the introduction or the beginning. Have you read that part yet?
Yeah, I've read it. And, I don't remember everything verbatim, but Billy has put so much information into this edition, including commentaries, not only in the introduction and all that, pages and pages in the introduction, but in where Emmanuel's teaching is, Billy often is inserting from a few sentences to a page's worth of information to explain what this is about, what it meant during those times, how Emmanuel actually did healings and how and when he didn't do healings, what was true and what wasn't, information about the 17 female disciples that never made their way into the Bible.
That's such interesting stuff. I like to do shows on this, and I usually do 2 or 3 shows a week on the Meier material. Mostly I focus on the Might of Thoughts, The Way to Live, and the Psyche. The book, The Psyche, is really interesting. That book, I had to read the first 30 pages dozens and dozens of times before it really sunk in, where all the terminology is. It's just incredible.
I still have to do many rereads on that one. I'm rereading the Way to Live now, and I jump in to reread in the Might of the Thoughts. I've read through some of the Goblet, but not all of them.
I think the Goblet's a little bit harder to read in some ways, at least for me.
Yeah, I think sometimes I feel that too. And it's, this big whopper of a book. So if I go out somewhere and I carry a book with me, I can carry the Psyche or the other couple of books with me. It's, easier than if I try to sit down somewhere with the Goblet, who gosh knows, I'm disturbed by people's curiosity.
Now, are you going back to Switzerland soon?
It'd be nice. I'm not sure about it.
So you don't have plans to make another film or anything like that?
Well, yeah, I have plans always to make another film if possible. For instance, if I have good footage from any of these 4 presentations in LA, I'll probably put that together. I always like to be able to interview Billy. Sometimes, it's come to the point now where one could honestly say everything important he's conveyed. There's more interesting information I'd like to get, but they haven't missed anything in terms of what we should be, getting on about.
Well, you said you did some presentations in LA.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah. Okay. There was an event called the Alchemy 5D event. Oh, heavens, Betsy. And what that was about, there's a guy that held one of these events last year up in Northern Cal, and he invited me to come and do it. And I went and I did it. And it was, so over the top with dopey, new age, imaginary, delusional, airy-fairy stuff. And I thought, I like Northern California. I'm glad I visited, but geez, I've known this guy for a while, and I did events for him many years ago, and I just stayed out of the way of it. So he asked me like 3 times to come and do this event, and I turned him down. And then I was in LA visiting, and he called me and he said, "Hey, if I cover your hotel," because the guy's very tight, he doesn't pay for anything. And, it's nice if you can make some money for your efforts, but that has never been the determining factor for my representing the case. I do it for free, and I try to get expenses covered if I've got to go somewhere, and if they want to pay something else, it's great. So this guy out of nowhere says, "Well, I'll pay for 2 hotels." And I said, "Well, look, I've got lodging in L.A. Pay for my air ticket." And he did. And I thought, okay. And then Bob Wiegand, who I don't know if you know Bob, maybe you do, but he's got his own, show also. He discovered the Meier material some years ago. I met him in Switzerland for the first time. He's a former Team 3 Navy SEAL.
Wow.
And he worked for the CIA. He worked for George H.W. Bush. And he, in his own, to paraphrase him, he got very screwed up, and he found the Meier case and the spiritual teachings saved his life. Okay? And Bob is a great guy, and he's interviewed me 3, 4, 5 times, whatever. And he came into L.A. He had business to do there anyhow. Same days I was there, and he got himself some nice video equipment and set it up at these presentations that I was involved with. So the first one was a panel, I think, to discuss UFOs. That was on a Friday night. Saturday, I gave a lecture, new lecture. Saturday night was another panel. And on Sunday, I kind of gave a quasi-workshop presentation on the spiritual teaching and introducing the Talmud of Emmanuel. So I'm waiting to hear from him what came of that when he's got the time to, actually come up with looking at the footage. So I'm really, really hoping that the footage came out well enough that I can, put it out on DVD or something like that. And oftentimes people say, oh, well, what are you going to put these things out as on YouTube? And I think, gosh, everybody likes to get everything for free. That's nice. That's really wonderful. But hey, how about, that it doesn't support me and my work, because believe it or not, I actually, have to carry on and do my work. And if I go to another city, even if someone puts me up in their home, I have to pay for food and transportation and stuff. To say nothing of spending 4 days in an irritating environment with people who are utterly delusional. And a few nice people, many people who can't come to the events. A lot of people on these panels and things, they're just they're crazy. They don't know what even Bob said, gosh, these people are mentally ill. I said, yeah, this is somebody ill. When somebody, it's so funny because he was so matter of fact, they're mentally ill. Yeah, Bob, when a guy gets up and starts talking about imaginary reptilians and Dracos that he is sending through the central sun to purify their soul, gets up with a straight face and says this stuff, that's when I said, hey, can we stop the BS? This is insanity. And people don't like it. Well, everybody has their don't give me your own reality stuff here. If you can't prove that there's Dracos and reptilians, if you can't move a postage stamp with your mind alone, and you're telling me you're processing things through the central sun, then you're a nutcase, and you should be institutionalized. You shouldn't be let loose on innocent people who think that just because you're speaking at an event that you actually are saying. You're not. Go away. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's great. Well, Michael, we're already done with an hour. I appreciate you so much coming on, and please tell us about your website, your books that are available, or anything else that you like.
Well, as you mentioned, the Talmud Emmanuel, and for those of your listeners, those in your audience who don't know, and I know you can tell them more too, this is represented as the original teaching of the man Emmanuel, who was falsely named Jesus Christ, the name of a human being that never existed, for whom there is zero historical record. And Emmanuel happens to be mentioned in both the Old and New Testament, for people who want to look into that. Anyway, this is a document in document form, now book form, that Meier and a former Greek Orthodox priest named Issa Rashid co-discovered in an ancient tomb on the outskirts of Jerusalem in 1963, as I said. And all of the intrigues around the assassination of this man, Issa Rashid, and his family, and the part of the Talmud that survived and has been translated a couple of times. This is the final translation that was worked on as well by the Playaran linguists, or language scientists, with some help, I think, from the Arahat Afasata, perhaps Patali level, I'm not sure. It's fascinating to read the real life of that man. Judas Iscariot was his true scribe, not the betrayer. The betrayer had a similar name as Judas Iscariot, who was the son of a Pharisee who betrayed him. The stuff in this book is so worth getting. It's in German on one page side and English the other. It's probably one of the most riveting things you will ever read, and it will eventually prevail in this world when the myths and lies of Christianity and Judaism and Islam have all been turned to the dust they deserve, and the truth is once again present. And then there is, as we mentioned, the Goblet of the Truth, books like The Psyche that you spoke about, The Might of the Thoughts, and The Way to Live. These are brilliant books from Meier, just brilliant. You can't go wrong. If you want DVDs, if you go onto my website at theyfly.com, you'll find a shop. If you order a DVD from that shop and you mention Mark, mention this show, either one, I will send you a free DVD along with it. And there's also my blog, theyflyblog.com. We have visitors on both my website and the blog from over 190 countries. People are interacting. They're discussing the Meier case. I have over 620 separate articles on my blog alone. So come on down, express yourself, your opinions, your doubts, your challenges, whatever you like, and let people start to find more of this information and then determine the truth for yourselves.
Thanks so much, Michael. Have a great evening, sir.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate it.